you had $10,000, what would you do with it? What if I told you that everyone in this room gets $10,000, except for the women? Not too happy about that, are we, ladies? It certainly doesn't seem fair. Neither is the wage gap between working men and women.
Did you know more than half the country are women? It's true. And yet somehow more than half the money goes to men.
The annual gender wage gap is $10,487, meaning that the average American woman is paid 80 cents for every dollar paid to man. On the surface, people just see this as a money issue, but the gap in payment affects women, men, the economy, education, and so much more. I am going to reveal the truth behind a lot of the myths associated with this issue, explain the effects of the gap, and offer solutions to close the gap permanently. First, while the wage gap has been a topic of conversation in our country for years, there's also a lot of misconceptions surrounding the problem.
The Labor Department itself, the president's own Labor Department, says it's 81 cents.
Another federal study, for example, says the disparity is more like 88 cents for every dollar.
The studies do show that when you do the controlling, there's about a 9% gap.
The wage gap is really somewhere between 5 and 7 cents.
Women who do not get married have virtually no wage gap. They earn 96 cents for every dollar a man makes.
How can we expect the problem to get solved when people don't even fully understand it? The primary misunderstanding is that the pay difference is a result of career choices that women are making.
Women make different choices about what kinds of jobs they seek. They make different choices in reaction to marriage and childbirth. When those factors are taken into consideration, studies have indicated that the pay gap all but evaporates.
Classic. Women are paid less because they choose to have children, although to be fair, they didn't technically choose to be the sole gender biologically capable of pregnancy, with the notable exception, of course, of seahorses and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jr.
I am here to explain what many people think that they might know about the gender wage gap. Myth number 1, the wage gap only exists in certain industries. The truth is that in the industries that employ the most full-time employees, which are healthcare, manufacturing, retail trade, and education services, women are paid less than men in all of them. Myth number 2, the wage gap is dependent upon education level.
A recent study out of Yale University that is interesting, where professors were given the identical resume. One had the name John on the top and one had the name Jennifer on top. And the male candidate was rated more favorably, and
Really?
they were offered on average $4,000 more than the female candidate.
The fact of the matter is, women with doctoral degrees are paid less than men with master's degrees, and women with master's degrees are paid less than men with bachelor's degrees. Clearly, regardless of your education level, this gap still exists. Myth number 3, race does not affect the wage gap. The bottom line is that the biggest disparity in wage difference is between Asian men and Hispanic women. Second, the most common way of explaining the wage gap to people is exactly how I presented it to all of you, 80 cents to a full dollar. The problem with that is there is much more on the line than just a few cents. Women employed full-time in the US lose a combined total of more than $840 billion every year due to the wage gap. As if the number isn't staggering enough to disturb you, let me put it into perspective. That money could pay for 15 more months of childcare, 1.2 additional years of tuition and fees for a 4-year public university, 78 more weeks of food for her family. That's a year and a half worth of food, 11 more months of rent, or 8.7 additional years of birth control. Clearly, alleviating the wage gap will contribute to solving other issues women are facing in this country. While it may seem like this huge issue has no end in sight, there do exist solutions to close the gap for good. However, experts believe that without supportive policies being pushed, men and women will not reach pay parity until 2059. That's 42 years. With that being said, there are some federal policies being worked on that start improving the problem. One example is the Paycheck Fairness Act. This protects employees who discuss their wages with their bosses when trying to demonstrate that discrimination has occurred. This act would encourage women to have this open discussion with their employer without the fear of losing their job. Furthermore, there is comprehensive reproductive health care that would enable women to pursue education and career opportunities to increase workforce attachment and wages over time. Additionally, full funding for federal agencies that investigate and enforce fair pay would be implemented. And finally, pregnancy discrimination laws, which would prevent women from being disassociated with their work due to pregnancy leave and eventually improve levels of retention and advancement after pregnancy. These laws would protect women who've had children and don't want to be penalized for that decision when they go back to work. Ultimately, it cannot be disputed that there's a severe wage gap between women and men in the United States. While many people like to break it down to a few cents to $1, women are being discriminated against in the workplace, and contrary to what people think, it has nothing to do with their choices. Whether a woman is educated or not, in retail or on Wall Street, studies show that no matter where she is or what she's doing, she is getting paid less than the men in her field.
Paying people less for the same work is clearly wrong. Even monkeys know that. Scientists actually ran a test where 2 monkeys performed exactly the same task. One was paid with a grape and the other with just a cucumber. Watch how the monkey who got the cucumber reacted when it realised it was underpaid. Hey, calm down, monkey. You don't know what the other monkey's experience and education were. You've just made different choices in your life. Besides, a cucumber is virtually the same as a grape.
The federal government is working to implement policies to close the gap, but those policies won't mean anything without support. If we don't act fast, the gap won't be closed for over 40 years, maybe still not even then. I have a 4-year-old niece, and when she graduates college, I want her to know that her work is worth the same, if not more, than the men she'll be working with. Thank you for listening.